third storyteller is someone I've known from another world. I've known this next storyteller from the world of stand-up comedy. And there's a side to this man that I didn't know about. I mean, he's full of surprises. He actually has a PhD in marine biology. He writes for Australia's Funniest Home Videos. And he has a wonderful story to tell about a friend in need. Please welcome to the stage Dr. Peter Green.
I'm not a useful doctor. Not one of those ones. Fanga Langtip was the first best friend that I'd ever had that I'd actually chosen for myself. Now, the previous holder of the position, Mark Ryan, he'd done a great job as my best friend. He'd done the tasks that best friends did. He taught me new dirty words. One day he threatened to punch me in the dick, and I didn't know what a dick was. Well, I did. I didn't know it was called a dick. All I knew, obviously, is somewhere on your body that's punchable. So I went home and got in a fight with one of my sisters and threatened to punch her in the dick. But Emu, Ryan, he was called Emu because he used to run with his head out ahead of the rest of his body. He was a good kid. We were friends because he lived 3 houses down the street. Our mums were friends. My sisters played with his sister. We were in the same soccer team. We walked to school together every day and played in each other's yards. If we hadn't been best friends, that would have been odd. But he was a good kid. I was a goody-goody. I was the teacher's pet. I was top of the class. I wanted to behave well. I was a pathetic junkie, basically, and my drug was praise from the grown-ups. But I was the kid that the bad kids in class were sat next to because I was a good influence. And that was great for me. Of course, if there was any talking ever heard from my part of the room, and 75% of the time I was the culprit, I was never blamed. And the trustees would be hauling some poor kid off to the headmaster's office, and the teacher would be saying, "Now, please don't lie and make it worse for yourself by saying that Peter Green was responsible." Now, Fanga Langtip was a naughty kid. He was a bad kid, 1975 10-year-old style. Like he didn't carry a knife or a gun to school. He wasn't setting things on fire. He just talked a lot. He mucked up. He got into fights with the other kids. He kind of didn't quite fit in, and he would play with the kids who were 2 years below us rather than with our grade. But he was a likeable kind of kid. He gave a teacher a Christmas card and he said, "Signed from your talkative friend." Which is kind of sweet, but inevitably he ended up in the seat next to me to be good influenced, and perhaps as part of his punishment. And I discovered that a guy who I'd kind of previously written off was he became my best friend. This is the guy who I'd previously not rated. He was the guy who taught me how to play chess. He's the guy who got me into stamp collecting. He had hidden debts. And the first time I'd ever gone round at his house was for the 1975 Rugby League Grand Final. Now, St George Dragons versus the Eastern Suburbs Roosters, and St George Dragons were our heroes. We lived in the heart of the St George area. I was dropped off at Fanga's place on the way home from the Sunday school picnic. The highlight of which was when they sticky taped lollies to the minister's large jacket, and we had to scramble him to get the lollies off him. That's not particularly relevant to the story. But I was excited because I was going to watch the Rugby League Grand Final on a coloured TV. And Finger Langtip's house had 2 stories, and he had an in-ground pool. These were Peakhurst's jet set. At half-time, Finger got out his collection of big leagues, and we opened them up at all the team group photos, and we went through them, and we just laughed at the players who had haircuts we thought were funny. Then we sat down to watch the second half, and Chenga Langlands, the St George captain, came out wearing his famous white boots, and St George got caned 38-0. It was pretty terrible. But anyway, for the next year, Finger and me were best mates, and that's a kid's year. That's a year that lasts the year. Not that the adult years are like dog years. They just whoosh by 7 kids' years at a time. But this was a full, long kids' year. For my birthday, Finger got me one of those T-shirts with my nickname, Bobbers, written on it. You could go down to Roselands and buy some technology basically akin to magic. You'd give them a word, and they'd turn up half an hour later with that word printed on a T-shirt. Basically, kids in 1975 looked like extras from Napoleon Dynamite, without the irony. So Finger and Bobbers and it became basically one word. What's Finger and Bobbers up to? It was one. We were that team. After about a year, and at my next birthday party a year later, the magic was wearing off. Finger had been acting like a bit of a dickhead. I'd cried at my birthday party, and on the car lift home when we were dropping all the kids off one by one, they were all vowing evil vengeance on Finger the next day at school. He was in the car as this was happening. He was the last person dropped off. And he was sick the next day. Didn't turn up at school. And anyway, we went to different high schools. And I probably saw him just maybe one more time after we started high school. He came around to play with me. And again, we ended up clashing, and I basically told him off and didn't really see him again. Anyway, the rest of our gang, Paul, Rick and Arthur, we'd all gone to the same high school, and so I developed a new best friend, Arthur, the Greek guy, so he was a bad boy too. And that was kind of my pattern of friendship. So I was the good girl who fell for the bad boy. And I kept those kind of friendships going basically through the rest of my life. And now when you do these things now, we have the technology. We can find our friends on Facebook. And I've dug up Rick. He was the class clown, or my rival for the class clown. He's the guy who puts very funny one-liners up on as his Facebook updates. Paul was a sweet guy then. He's a sweet guy now. I caught up with Paul for a beer a month or so ago. Arthur is very mysterious. He can't be tracked down. He's off somewhere being bad. I was wondering what a Finger Langtip Facebook update would be. What would the picture be like? I couldn't imagine it not being lively. I couldn't imagine tracking him down and not finding out that he's gone through life. I couldn't imagine him just being a boring guy in the suburbs. Not that there's anything wrong with that. I know I won't find him on Facebook though. About 2.5 years after I started high school, we got a phone call at my house, and my mum picked up the phone and she started to tear up. And she came and she gave me a hug and said, "Look, there's some bad news about Finger. He'd been in a mini bike accident and he got killed without ever regaining consciousness." And my mum said, "Would you like to go to the funeral?" I said, "Oh, look, I've got school, important things on." She said, "That's fine." My mum went to the funeral. And my 47-year-old me wants to shake the 14-year-old me and go, "Why didn't you go to the funeral? Why didn't you go and honour your friend?" But he hadn't been my friend for 2.5 kids' years. It was like someone from another life. It didn't touch me so much then. I was sad, but it was like a celebrity that you like dying. You don't like it, but it's not touching your real life anymore. I think the 14-year-old me with the EQ of a sandfly wouldn't necessarily have done the funeral very well anyway. And even 47-year-old me would struggle. I've had lots of best friends since then. I've had one good best friend for the last 30 years, and I've had the friends who've done the whole standing by you thing, and I've stood by them through the things that you stand by your best friends with. Illnesses, deaths of friends, deaths of parents, marriage breakups, fits of depression, a friend revealing that he'd been molested in high school, these things, and I've had those friends. But Frank Langtip, he was just a friend that we laughed at the guys in the Newtown Jets who had the cheesiest moustache. He was a friend who the most supportive thing he did for me was help me make a whirlpool in our Clark Rubber above ground pool. Now, Fanger's dad was a quiet man. His mum was bubbly and vibrant. She worked at the Cograwa cell. She was pretty sophisticated. Probably about a year after I kind of lost contact with him, his parents had separated. So at the time I was with his friend, things at his home probably was a tense place, and perhaps all he needed was just a friend to laugh with. And anyway, I was the good girl, he was the bad boy. I got the thrill ride that the good girls get from being with the bad boy, and the bad boy got someone who saw the good in him. And plus, I can look back on the 1975 grand final and not be too traumatised. Yeah, thank you very much.
Peter Green. I'm laughing because sitting at the front here is a former player with the Newtown Jets. He's going to be rushing to the bathroom to make sure he still isn't wearing that silly moustache. Anyway, wonderful story, Peter. Thank you so much.